What is up, guys? Welcome to the Bearded Talk podcast. This is your host, Adam Mason, at Mason Photography on Instagram. Really fun episode coming at you from Dave Krugman. But before we get into that, I just wanted to let you know, if you're new here, we have podcasts every single week coming out, over 100 episodes, usually from photographers, entrepreneurs, people who have something to share that I find really unique. Maybe something that you haven't heard from that particular person on another podcast. Obviously, podcasts are so conversational in general that I think all of them are different. And so like when I like somebody, I want to hear all of their content. So I would encourage you to subscribe in your podcast player if you haven't already. So I know I'm big ask up front. I want you to subscribe to the Bearded Talk. It would mean a lot. We've got a lot of fun episodes coming out soon. And in addition, we have a lot of good episodes in the past that are still free and accessible that I'd love for you to check out. Really fun. What else is really fun is Dave Krugman, New York City photographer, social media consultant with over 300,000 Instagram followers. Also the founder of allships.co. Really cool kind of website project that is, not going to go against social media by any means, but a safe, creative place for creatives. And I absolutely love that. So I wanted to have Dave on just because he's an incredible guy, super sweet person. He's also another one of those guys that I feel like is more than a photographer, which most of them are, obviously, as we've seen. And I just wanted to kind of talk to him and hear about his story and how he approaches what he does. So without any further ado, here's Dave Krugman. Dave, happy Wednesday, man. Super pumped to have you on. I've been following you for a long time, and it's one of those ones in my mind where I'm reaching out and I'm kind of like, there is no chance this dude's going to reply, and then you replied, and it was like, okay, mobilize whatever it takes to get Dave on. So just thanks for coming on, man. I'm excited about this.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah,
I'm really glad you reached out, and I think that some people might think if you just find somebody's work on the internet, they might be unapproachable, but I'm definitely always trying to be the opposite and just be as open as possible with my thoughts and my journey that I've been on creatively. So thanks for having me.
Totally. That's awesome. I want to ask you ironically, before we get to the actual fun, you mentioned your thoughts, the curiosity, I'm going to ask about all the work you've been doing. I'm going to ask you a very specific gear question just for fun. I was poking around your site and I noticed, we're both Sony guys, so totally great there. It's awesome. And I don't really care about brands. It's, whatever the best gear for you is. But I wanted to ask you, use the Noctilux 50 1.0, or at least it's on your site. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you, how do you like that? It's manual focus, right? You enjoying that? Is that a fun thing for Sony? Really, I think Sony people don't realize they can bring on other lenses.
Yeah, so
easily.
It's actually the reason I originally switched to the Sony system.
Okay.
I'm fortunate enough to be a part of their kind of alpha collective, alpha imaging collective.
Yeah.
Now, but before I knew anybody at Sony or was involved with them in any way, I actually made the leap from Nikon to the alpha system specifically to use vintage glass. And that's because my grandfather was kind of an avid camera collector, and he just loved the gear. And, he was a lawyer and he had some clients that also appreciated that stuff. So he was kind of collecting all this incredible glass over, the decades. And then, that stuff made its way toward my father. And then from my father, it made its way to me. So once I started taking photography a little more seriously, my dad kind of pulled me aside and was like, by the way, check this out. and opened up this box with shrink wrapped Leica lenses and stuff that has never been used. And, some stuff that was lightly used. But I was like, oh my gosh. And I started poking around and I found, some techniques online with some pretty, complex machining. You could put those lenses on a digital body, like a DSLR or something like that. But I didn't want to destroy those lenses or modify them in any way. They're kind of too precious. So that kind of went on the back burner for a bit. But then my friend Jose Silva, JN Silva on Instagram, I'm sure you're familiar. He was working with Sony on some projects, and he had an alpha camera, and I was like, wait a minute, that looks just like a, mirror that looks like a SLR or not SLR. It looks just like a film camera, the way that like when the lens pops off, you see the sensors right there and there's no mirror. Which means that, arguably those lenses with the right adapter could fit on that body.
Right.
As opposed to a DSLR, which just because of the distance between the sensor and the lens, you'd have to actually put the lens inside,
Yeah, you have to get it so close.
Yeah. But on the mirrorless, it just works with the simple machined adapter. And so I started poking around online and realized that, there's this whole kind of movement towards that. And there's pretty inexpensive Leica M to Sony E mount adapters, $70, you can just use any Leica lens. And then you combine that old, beautiful old glass that has its own signature and kind of tone and quality to it. And you combine that, kind of elite mechanical technology with this new digital system. And it's like this beautiful Frankenstein camera that can do more than, either just the old mechanical or just the digital can do. Right. Because things like focus peaking, focus magnification, and all the other incredible kind of, I would call almost like augmented reality features of the Sony system. And the live preview and in the electronic viewfinder, like I can take that at f1 or any f-stop and punch in and get like pixel perfect focus on anything. And so that's basically why I started doing that, and it's a big part of the look I've curated.
That's awesome. Is that that particular lens, or is there a particular lens that's like in your bag that is on the kind of the weird side that's not necessarily your stock B&H side?
So the Noctilux is definitely like, I don't know if weird's the right word. It's definitely like unnecessary.
Yeah.
But it's super fun.
Right. And,
unnecessary. I mean, as like nobody should hear this and think that they need to buy a $10,000 lens.
Right.
Like that's just ridiculous. I would never buy that lens personally. There's cheaper kind of f1.1s by like Voigtlander and SLR Magic that are totally capable of getting that wide open. But it's because I inherited it and it's part of my I would call my like, creative lineage.
Yeah.
I love using it and it's fun and the quality is just like immaculate and cinematic and beautiful. But so that's like a little weird. Like I wouldn't necessarily use that on a client shoot unless it was like a portraiture thing, or like I was really leaning into that kind of depth of field look. But other than that, no, I'm very much like a gear helps, but it's not the point kind of guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know I have a separate account on Instagram called Secret Street, and it's 6 years of daily iPhone shots. That's awesome. And basically the reason I made that account was because over the years, the number one question I get from younger photographers or photographers that are kind of finding their path is, okay, I have $1,000. What lens should I buy? Or what should I do here? And I'm like, buy a plane ticket and take your phone. Like just go. Like it's about seeing the world. And I know that, I'm speaking as somebody who has accumulated a lot of gear, and it's very easy for me to say that. But really, truly, photography is the art of observation. And like when you're working on your craft, like you need to study observing and recording. Right. It doesn't really, matter specifically. Like there's not going to be one magic setup that's going to make you a better photographer.
Right.
What makes you a better photographer is repetition, curiosity, empathy. Understanding of the world, a willingness to put yourself outside of your comfort zone, a willingness to tell stories. And that's really what the craft of photography is about to me. And gear is like, important in order to get really high quality imagery, but you can, in your pocket, you likely have a camera more powerful than anything you could have in like the 1990s.
Totally. No, I totally agree. It's like something I've been thinking about the last few years as I'm primarily a wedding photographer, and I've been shifting to where mentally, I talk about this all the time, but like I don't create photos anymore to impress other photographers, which is kind of weird, right? Because when you first start, you're like, oh yeah, I want to create photos that I like, or maybe I achieved a certain technical thing that I was looking for or whatever. And then the reality now, kind of like you mentioned, is like, I don't think a house builder cares that much about his tools. He might be excited about his tools, but he's excited when the house is done and he goes, look what I made. And that's exactly what matters. And it's like, I think people ask like, hey, what hammer did you use on this house? And I don't know if the house builder cares that much. It's something to pay attention to, but
Yeah, another great analogy I've heard, I'm not taking credit for this by any means, but I read it online, was it's like you never go have dinner at a restaurant and you're like, oh my god, this is so amazing, like what oven is in the oven did you use? Like, it doesn't matter.
People always come up to me at weddings, they'll be like, nice camera, and I always say it's literally the restaurant thing. I'll say it's the chef, not the knives.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, at a certain point you have enough to get started.
Yeah.
And that's what I would really insist upon if someone is listening to this and is interested in getting into photography. Just start.
Yeah.
You don't need to go buy something. Just start with your phone. Some of my favorite pictures I've ever taken are with my iPhone. So
yeah, no, totally. And again, there's like this value, no matter, I'm like still waiting on even the mirrorless cameras to get like as small as possible, but like your phone is just with you everywhere. Like, when was the last time you took your Sony Alpha camera into the bathroom with you? And obviously there's no need, but you might have a cool photo or there's a background or something. And it's like your phone is with you, and it's probably the one that you feel most comfortable with if you're new. And it's like, just, move your feet, like get engaged, look for things, explore. Like, I know for you and probably myself, like, our cameras have helped us see things we've never been able to see before. And you're like, hey, like go pursue that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I treat my camera, I one of the kind of expressions I love harping on is my camera is my master key.
That's awesome.
Like, because I can use this piece of equipment and I've built up enough of an audience that I can shine a spotlight on things, it's unlocked the world for me.
Yeah.
And that's taken me, anywhere from like being alone at the Metropolitan Museum of Art to, being in a helicopter above Tokyo at midnight.
Yeah.
All because of this, piece of equipment and but more importantly, my craft and passion for recording images and sharing those stories with my audience.
Totally. Now, that related, tell me a little bit about your kind of journey. I know you mentioned your dad collected these high-end lenses, but maybe it wasn't necessarily a photographer professionally. He's a lawyer. What was your journey to photography? Were you interested? Were you not interested? Was there a key moment that you were like, okay, this looks cool and like something I want to do? And then when did that become your job?
So just to start at the beginning. So actually, it was my grandfather who kind of was collecting cameras, and then my father they had a dark room in the house and they were working together a lot. And it was my grandfather who was a lawyer, but my father worked in information technology at Boston University.
Okay.
And so he had this other perspective that was also a gift to me about the power of technology and communications networks and tools and all that. And then, so I went to Boston University while he was also there too, and I studied psychology. And so then I added another layer into my perspective, which was like human behavior, group psychology, abnormal psychology, drugs and behavior, all these incredible insights into what makes people tick and what's important to people and how communities form. And, even my studies about addiction and like drug abuse like apply a lot to social media, because the tactics, I mean, we all know this by now, but the tactics that these social media companies use to monopolize our attention are all based in like very sound psychology and psychology research, and we're part of the biggest psychological experiment of all time right now.
Yeah.
But that being said, to say that I have a very kind of unique outlook and construction of how I made my own career. Like, I think I have a pretty unique path. So basically, I always wanted to be a photographer since I was like 9. I never really saw a path. Fortunately, my parents and sister and my immediate family were extremely supportive. Although, the world itself and my, at my public school, it was very like art to me felt very discouraged. Like, it was like, oh, this is a fun thing you can do, but there's no money in it.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my family was like more like, oh, if that's what you want to do, you should pursue that. And so basically I didn't really realize I could be a professional photographer until like halfway through college. And I started, in the back of all my lectures, I was listening in, but I was also in Photoshop, like doing these like tutorials online about how to, separate backgrounds and do all this weird, gross HDR stuff that horrifies me today.
Trey Ratcliffe,
Yeah. Well, Trey Ratcliffe, it's funny. He's a great guy. But I definitely was like, mimicking his early HDR style when I first got into digital photography.
Yeah.
Now it's just a little too intense for me, but I definitely appreciate that phase of my life. So I started getting really good at Photoshop, and then I, shot for the school magazine, the fashion magazine we had there. And it started to be like, oh, like I see how this could fit into society at large. And I started noticing that really like everything is, the image is becoming increasingly important right now. Still, you could say, oh, everyone's a photographer, so no one's a photographer. But even though the supply of people creating photographs is larger than it's ever been before, the demand is far exceeding the supply still, because every single screen is an infinitely refreshing place for images.
Yeah.
Whether it's advertising or art or, little video clips. Even the top of taxi cabs in New York now are rotating. And that used to be one static spot that would be taken up for a month by one photographer or one ad, right? And now there's 20 ads on that one in 1 hour on that same thing. So what that means is that there's more of a demand for visual content than ever before. So this is the best time to be a photographer. And next year will be an even better time. And it's just, I would encourage everybody to get into it. But anyway, I started seeing that pattern happening of increasing demand for compelling visual content. And in our attention economy, it's the compelling visual content that in the long run will help a brand win. The brand who's half-assing it. A great example is Obama's photographer, Pete Souza, incredible artist and photojournalist, and any title you want to give him, he's just an incredible storyteller. And if you look at the images from the Obama administration, like this, it's great branding, honestly.
Yeah, totally.
And then in other administrations, like where they didn't take the effort to hire like a really incredible, like world-class photojournalist, you can see that the branding is a little off. Like visually, it's like less appealing.
Yeah.
That's just one example, but I mean, that works for any brand. That's why, brands hire the best photographers that they can possibly find. So I just started seeing that there was definitely a big industry to kind of try to get into. And that's what I ended up trying to go for after I graduated from Boston University. So I moved to New York. I actually was lucky enough. A family friend of ours, Alex Verhav, was an assistant for Annie Leibovitz.
Wow.
And they brought me in to do some retouching work because I was, very proficient in Photoshop. They gave me a little Photoshop test. They're like, you're good. And so I did that for about 2 years, on and off, depending on what projects were going on. And I was retouching in her studio in the West Village. And that was a whole education in the scale of these projects and what was possible out there. So that happened. And then that was 2013, 2012. And that's about when Instagram came out. And I first just downloaded it. It was just another app. I'm sure you remember if you were around, but it was there was that. There's Hipstamatic. There's all these other weird little communities.
Chase Jarvis, his other Pocket app too.
Yeah. So I just started messing around with all the apps, and it turned out that Instagram kind of ended up being the clear winner. Yeah. But once it started picking up, I saw that this photographer Chris Ozer was doing it was like work in collaboration with PayPal, and I was like, oh, I see what's happening here. This is like a little magazine that lives on our phones, and how does a magazine work? People subscribe to it, and then they sell advertisements against compelling content. So if you can create compelling content and then put advertisements in between it, then you're basically running the same media model as a magazine. And that's how I started to think about it. And I was like, all right, so then how can I increase my subscription base? And my answer for that was by being a hub in the community and like letting those links and relationships flow through me and my account. And then just layering that year over year, doing get-togethers with my friends, Jose Silva and I did, and tons of these events where like 300 people would show up just to take pictures.
Wow.
And then like, but if you're the one organizing it, then like all those arrows kind of point at you.
Totally.
And then if you use your platform to amplify other people in the community, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. Like you're going to keep gaining traction, and now here we are 7 years later, and we've been able to do very well in that field. So
that's awesome. That's super cool.
I hope that was a very long-winded journey description, but that's basically it.
No, it's all good, man. I'm a big fan of like letting anybody talk for as long as they need, and it's good to hear those stories, because I think like there are my biggest goal with this podcast, and at least for me and telling other photographers, is that like your story doesn't have to look like anybody else's, right?
Right.
So it's like your
and it
story.
won't.
Right, yeah, exactly. But I think too, it's like even your particular like retouching story with like Andy Leibovitz out of college. I think somebody hearing that and saying, okay, I'm not sure if I can go full time at photography yet and work for myself yet, but I'd love to be in that field. And it's like, hey, are you proficient at Photoshop? Or hey, you're going to put in some work on your own time and try and make this happen. And it's like, I can't guarantee you that you'll get a job retouching, but that's definitely something you could be available for. If you want it to be in the industry. I know I interned with a film company in Philly, and what I learned from that was like, obviously I'd love to be the camera guy, but until then, I just want to be on set. I just want to be in there and in that circle of rotation as things are happening, and you can slowly get closer and closer, to the sun. Either being the DP or being the actor on the other side or whatever.
Right, exactly. But yeah, I mean, it's a good way to get an overview of like the entire process. I mean, I had no idea when I first started retouching in such a prestigious studio.
Yeah.
I didn't understand at all what went into creating like a magazine cover.
Yeah.
Like I had no idea the sheer scale of both budgets and crew and like planning and production and like location, and just like I just was completely unaware. I mean, you just don't know what you don't see, right? So to be on set in any degree, even if you're getting somebody coffee, that's like a priceless education. That's more than you're ever going to learn in school, honestly.
Yeah.
So
totally.
It's interesting.
You got to be close to what's going on. That's why I think too, a lot of photographers find it like underrated to be like, hey, if you can get on set with somebody, or you can walk around at an Insta meet or something like that with somebody and have kind of a safe, neutral, low cost way to learn, or even internships, unpaid or paid, I'm like, take it. Like, always never miss the opportunity to learn, because it's like, you just never know. And then if somebody is like you, where you have the skill to back it up and are willing to like keep going, then it's like the possibilities are endless and you have no idea where it can take you. So that's really cool. Yeah, I think too, I was like looking through all your stuff, and the client list was so long, but the ones I have a motorcycle, so I was like, oh, Ducati, that's super awesome. Honda, Manfrotto, and then you've been featured like everywhere, New York Times and Bloomberg and GQ. So I love all of that. I guess I want to talk about I read something about your, this like natural curiosity, which I'm addicted to. I love that, of like, keep learning, right? We just talked about it. Does that come from the psychological background? And then also too, what does that look like now? Because I feel like you post a lot of personal work. Like you are out, like a lot of photographers, they get to the point where they can make money off of shooting, and then they stop shooting unless they're getting paid.
Right.
Yeah. And at least for you, my impression is that you do not do that. My impression is that you're shooting all the time just for fun. And like,
yeah, I mean, that's like my drive in photography is personal. I love it.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna do it regardless of what I'm getting paid to do.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite images I've ever taken were on lunch breaks when I worked a 9-to-5 job in advertising. So, I'd leave a meeting and I'd see it was raining outside, and I'd run outside and, just start shooting. Cause I really am that passionate about it. It's a game to me. It's like, what can you, because especially in New York, there's like, you're in the swirl of circumstances and kind of overlapping variables. And like your job as a photographer is like pin down these moments in time that look beautiful to you. And like, you are the lens by which like the world is shown to whoever sees it through your eyes. Right.
Yeah.
So that's just amazing to me. And that, like, I am curious about that. I'm curious about how much further I can take that. And, you know, for example, one of those images I took at lunch, I was able, 3 years later, I sold it to Google for the background of the Pixel phone.
Wow.
And it's just like, that was just for fun, but it turned into a huge, like one of my biggest, paychecks that year. And so the division between pleasure and work for me is like very fluid. Some of my favorite jobs I've ever been on were like, I got to go like explore Japan. It's like, I would do that. I would pay to go do that, but I was getting paid. So it's like, that's the ideal for me. Yeah. I was going to say something. Oh, yeah. So like about curiosity is like all of life is lifelong learning to me. I think that the idea of like mastery is just kind of like it's like a mirage. I think that I'll speak specifically about photography, but I think this applies to life in general, especially in any creative fields. But like you never, there's not a place you're trying to get to. There's no end. There can be like stages along the way where you can be like, oh, I reached my goal of this and that. And like, but don't lie to yourself and think that you're going to hit that point and be like, oh, okay, I'm finally satisfied. Like I did it. No, it's like, especially with photography, like I'd compare it to learning a language. Like I'm obviously fluent in English, right? But there's probably 10,000 words I've never heard before and I don't use and I don't know. So like it's a lifelong journey of like increasing fluency creatively, but there's no true master of all language or something like that, right? It's this constantly evolving thing. And that to me is like, there's a lot of comparisons I could make between poetry and photography, right? So it's like you have a toolbox of different techniques and vocabulary and tone and rhythm that you can work with. And however you combine them, you create some final product, and then you start over again, and you like recombine, and you can incorporate new tools into your toolbox to create with. Same thing with photography, whether it's a new piece of equipment or it's a new idea, or like you figured out how to work with reflections, or you figured out, how your depth of field can affect like a picture of raindrops. Like, you're shooting, if you shoot wide open, it's just raindrops, but if you bump up your ISO and shoot at like F11, you see everything behind the raindrops too. And like once you get a new technique like that, you add that into your kind of mathematical equations about what's possible visually,
right?
And everything recombines like factorially, and you get a whole new world opens up to you visually. So
right, no, totally. It's like these techniques. I went to school for guitar, and it was like this idea of you would learn what are called like etudes or etudes to have a technique that eventually, and so you'd like learn a song using this technique. And most of the songs were not that great, because it's like trying to technically get you good at this. And so you're like, hey, I'm going to have a lot of garbage along the way musically. Like nobody's going to want to listen to this, but it's like, oh, if I can use this technique, now it's like I'm learning a new way to speak, like you mentioned. It's like this new dialect or this like or like an accent, right? Like America in general has like tons of different accents all over the country, from the traditional New Yorker and Brooklyn, even that to Queens. Like those guys talk differently, to now. So that's really cool. That's a cool way of looking at it. I think.
And it also makes it like so much more fun because know that it's a journey that I will be taking photographs until the day I die. I will be taking different types of photographs throughout my whole life. I'm not going to like narrow myself into a corner. Yeah.
I think too with keeping it mentally thinking about it as like a language. I think that at least in my world, in the wedding photography world, oftentimes, at least for me and maybe other wedding photographers, we seldom think about our work as like creating good work. We're like creating work that is going to make other people happy, and that's our first goal, usually. And a lot of us we like that, we really enjoy that. But I think too, it almost is like it gives us permission to be like, hey, like no matter what you're shooting, like if you like what you're doing, you're just speaking the same language but a different part of that. Or oh yeah, like Adam knows this accent and Dave knows this accent. Where like I talk to good friends of mine, and especially even like you, where I'm like, I suck at landscapes. Like if there's no people in the photo, I have no clue what's happening. Right. I'm like what am I looking for here? Whereas like with people, I have this whole system, like we shot our millionth photo last year as a wedding photographer, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I have this whole thing that I'm looking for, and then this problem solving if I can't get what I'm looking for, and these like systems. And And it's like, you have those as well. And you're like, this is what I want. This is what I see first. And then this is what I want, adjusting accordingly. And one of my buddies, he's a photojournalist. He always says it's like chasing the dragon. Like, you'll get that photo and it's 9 out of 10. You're like, okay, yeah, client loves it. I like it. But man, I really wish the sun was different that way. Or, there are a little bit too many trash cans. It would have felt better if there were no trash cans in this photo. So
it's funny. I was having a conversation with some friends the other day, and I was like, we were talking about basically, we all experience imposter syndrome.
Sure.
Like, I think every creative person does. And I think it's actually built into the process. Like, because there's always going to be, like, it almost, you have to doubt yourself in order to grow.
Yeah.
If you think you're killing it every time, you're not going to learn.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, because it's a really shitty feeling to have imposter syndrome, which I just always constantly do.
Yeah.
But without that little bit of doubt and thinking, oh, I'm not doing well enough. I'm not pushing it hard enough. That's actually fuel to like take things a little bit further.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting too.
Yeah.
Although it's hard to deal with mentally because it can be very.
I wonder what imposter syndrome looks like outside of business. Like if we didn't have to make money off of photography, or maybe that was like somehow impossible and we all just knew that, if there would be less imposter syndrome. Or at least for me in my world, it always comes up when it's like, hey, am I good enough to charge this much? And then if your mental answer is no, then you're like, oh yeah, I'm an imposter. To which obviously we would say like, well, hey, get better, like make it so that you can feel confident in selling at that. But we also said, like, that feeling never goes away. The price goes up, and then you're like, hopefully they say yes.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
so it's hard
with pricing, my advice to people pricing is like, think about what you would walk away from that experience like feeling comfortable with in terms of amount of money. So if a brand hit me up and we're like, hey, this is what we need, and I'm like, okay, I need, X amount of money to do that.
Sure. Totally.
In my head, right? I'm like, I feel comfortable with that. And then I'll like double or triple it and just say it and like be like almost like horrified that I did it. And then they usually come back to like, great.
Yeah.
So that's one way to defeat yourself, is like find your own baseline for what you're satisfied with and then far exceed it, especially if you're working for like a big brand or corporation.
Totally.
Because they have absurd amounts of money for advertising.
Yeah.
And that's like that's most of their budget. So
yeah. Speaking of money, I'm always curious, and you don't have to say any numbers by any means, but for somebody like you who I think has like a non-conventional photo route, you mentioned licensing an image to Google. We talked about some of the brands you've worked with. Like, if I was looking at a pie chart of like where Dave's revenue comes in from, what does that look like for you? Is that, some 10% licensing to big brands?
I can't really break it down that specifically. It's kind of more of a mess than that.
Totally.
But, there's a couple revenue streams. One is like my personality and presence online.
Yeah.
And that's actually pretty valuable. So brands will pay to be associated with my Instagram presence and
traditional
my online presence.
Influencer kind of stuff?
Yeah, a little bit.
Like a sponsored post or something.
Yeah, I mean, I have all sorts of problems with that word just because I don't really think it means anything.
Totally. I was just checking to see if that was like the same wavelength.
But in that role of more of like a publisher, as I would call it. But increasingly, because the tools to do paid media buys on Instagram are so robust now, it's a much better deal for brands to, pay me to make work, and then they post it and push it out with their like media plan on Instagram, like paying Facebook to distribute it.
Yeah.
It's just more accurate, and you can target, and you get reporting. And if you're hiring some random person with a couple 100,000 followers, like there's no like transparency or like targeting or like,
there's no
it doesn't
data.
necessarily mean that much. But the advantage of a photographer with a big following is I've proven that I understand what works on the platform. And so brands will hire me to create work that is what I would call social first content.
Yeah.
And they know that, for example, Honda is a great example of this. They've been such a great client because they're like, go out, here's a car, go out, do your thing.
Yeah.
They're very like, it's definitely a process of collaboration 100%. Sure. But they trust me to make work that works on the platform. And it's less about me posting and more about like making really compelling photography for brands.
Yeah. I think brands have to, this is not the best word for it, but like obviously in this, like you mentioned, this Instagram is refreshing all the time. We're refreshing it, right? And we're doing this thing, and you have to make, social first is like a much better way to say it, but I think in a way it's like not clickbaity, but like baity, where you're like mentally, like it has to catch it first. And Honda is like, yeah, we can make the photos of our cars or our vehicles that, that you've seen for decades easy as pie, right? Like those just like gorgeous stock images of cars, but they're like, that is not, the majority of us, we don't see our vehicles that way. Like if you own one, right? And they know that. And they're like, okay, let's let Dave look like he went on a trip with his car and, and like did this badass thing. And it's like, it's almost, again, it's part of that language, right? Like Dave speaks the language of Instagram and Honda knows that. And you're like, hey, I know social. Let me translate for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you touched on something that's interesting because you said like, oh, let's make it seem like Dave goes on a trip. And like my philosophy, and especially when I'm doing consulting work for brands, is like advertising used to be like, okay, we're going to invent a story that we're going to try to convince people is like authentic and, it's going to take all this effort and almost make like a movie about, Snickers or something, right?
Buying the spouse a car for Christmas. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so like, to me, social it should be the opposite of that. It's like, just let a real story happen and let the, content creators be a window into that world. So like when I do work for Honda, like I go on a road trip with my friends. We have a blast.
Yeah. That's awesome.
We actually like do it. And along the way we take pictures.
Right.
And then I come back with all that work and it's an authentic experience and an authentic story. And it unfolded how any other road trip would unfold, except once in a while we stopped and like, made some pictures.
Right. No, totally.
Which we would do anyway, again. So it's like, it's a very, authentic experience to make work for social media if you get the bandwidth to do that with your clients.
Yeah. Well, I think too, they know the more they trust you it's going to help them because the consumers on Instagram and us, right, and everybody, we can tell when it's fake. And the more fake it feels, the less we care about it.
Right, exactly.
And if it feels real, then it feels awesome. And it's like, okay, Honda maybe gave you like 5 headlines, or they said, hey, this is not a production model, don't shoot the left handle, or something, those like maybe little tiny notes if you're traditionally coming from that world. And then it's like, other than that, I'm going to shoot it like I'm having fun, I'm going to shoot it how I want. And I think brands, what I'm realizing in the few corporate gigs I've had some kind of longer clients. It's been awesome because they just let you be the expert, which is really fun. And you say, all right, like we are, what do they call it? Like I'm dividing, I'm delegating, I'm outsourcing. And we're saying, no, Dave is the guy for this. Like if we need like authentic, social first, badass, images to promote to a different audience or a different demographic, like let's let him do that thing. We're going to talk about it. We'll have the meetings. We'll probably hop on this unnecessary Zoom with 13 people. Trust me, I had a lot of those last year where I was like, what? This is new to me, but okay. And you're going to ask all these questions about like, of course the images are high resolution. How did you get your job? But, and then you make it happen. So that's really cool. That's awesome. What's other than you mentioned Tokyo and Honda, any other fun gigs you've gotten to do that have had that much freedom, and matched it with fun?
Yeah. I mean, probably the best trip of my life. It's hard to pick, but, I went down with some friends to Cuba for Sony, and, it was just the perfect trip. It was just so amazing. And, to spend 10 days, just, putting the cameras to the paces and the way that Sony Alpha just curated that trip and, the people that were on it. Like it was me, I don't know if you know Moneris, Paula, Steve Sweatpants, Ovek, just the list goes on and on, but it was just like the most like, it's almost hard to put into words, but it was so special, and Cuba is such a special country. And, another trip where I just couldn't believe that this was work. So.
Right. No, totally. Did you, that was recent, right? Because they just like opened up Cuba to American.
It was relatively recent. I think it's almost 3 years ago now.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That's awesome. That is awesome. Those are the fun ones when, again, it's like, okay, they need me to make the work that I am pumped about, because if I'm not pumped about it, then they'll know as well. So it's like this chain of like, okay, sometimes I know on those gigs I have to get out of my head because I'm like, oh, this is what I think they would want, and be like, no, they hired you to make what you want, most likely, with a few guidelines. And and that could be
that
hard.
trip was funny because like it's just be like we'd wake up and just get in a van and they'd be like, all right, we have a surprise for you today, and we'd go and it'd be like a outdoor barbecue in the middle of a tobacco field in Vinales, Cuba, with like hand rolled cigars, and just like I'm like, okay, here we go. Like,
right.
There's never any point that's like, here's the shots we need. It's just like, no, you have the cameras. We're gonna put incredible things in front of you.
Yeah.
And we're sharing work with the subjects, and they're getting excited, and then the situations get even better, and it was phenomenal.
That's super cool.
I'm so grateful to have had that opportunity.
Yeah. And you're with other people who are inspiring you. Like, I always find like when I'm around other photographers, I dress up a little bit. I'm excited. I'm like, oh, what's my cool jacket? Or do I have a new jacket that I want to show? And vice versa. And you're like, you want to make them look good, but then there's also like it's a fun, weird community. It's cool.
Are you the guy who wears a yellow rain jacket to the meetup and stands in precarious positions
in Iceland? Just
look at me.
Yeah, in a rainy place. That's hilarious. I love Iceland. I've been 7 times, or at least that's the country I think of when I think of the yellow jacket. That's what I proposed to my wife. That's some of my commercial work I got to do there, which was kind of cool and new. And they were like, yeah, just take cool photos of the car. It was like for a rental car company, like in the tourism industry. And I was like,
I love Iceland too.
Yes, I will do this. So I was like, I do not have a yellow jacket though. So that's hilarious. Not a North Face ad. Okay, for people who are kind of curious, and we'll get to some other fun projects in a second, what do you think, how can a photographer who, let's say that their work is good, but the marketing angle they don't necessarily have, or they don't have the in, how can they, what would be your best advice to just start getting into, shooting for brands at this kind of thing? They don't want to be the brand's photographer, right? You don't want a full-time job at Honda per se. What does that look like for them? Is it an Instagram strategy, just like tagging and hoping? Is it renting a cool car of Turo and showing what you can do?
You should be. I mean, look, if you need to build out your portfolio, I think that that's a great way to do it. Make your own. You can make your own portfolio, and like I did a lot of free work as a younger photographer that just to knock down some doors, and it worked. I think it's a great way to do it. But if you're past that point and you like really want to start, finding a way to make money in this field, the best thing you can do is to be proactive and to identify the opportunities where you can help somebody else do their job better, right? So it's every brand, it's somebody's job to find, visuals, right? There's, especially now with social media, I mean, this is the beauty of the era we live in,
right?
Is that it doesn't matter who you are. Even every individual is now a brand, right?
Right.
So like they need portraits, they need environmental work, they need all sorts of different things, even just as an individual, like a CEO needs that, right? So go find, you could start even with your local coffee shop, or like you could start at the smallest level you could possibly think of and just say, look, I can help you guys take your online presence to the next level. Here's some work I've done. I'd like to do the same for you. And that will help you, either you do it to build your portfolio and you do it for free, or you charge a small fee and you just start layering up from there. But, you can go search through Instagram right now and find there's always a need somewhere. So if you can identify that need and then show that you're the person who can fulfill it, that's a winning strategy. It might seem impossible, but like, it's really not. I've sent emails to places being like, hey, I think I could really help you guys out here. And if in exchange for X, or, either money or access or some sort of arrangement, again, the camera's the master key. Those doors fly off the hinges because they're like, oh my God, I love your work and it looks so good. And once you have a little bit of traction on social media, there's this other kind of thing. And they're like, oh, you have a bunch of followers. Like you could help us get our message out to more people.
Totally.
So, but building up to that, I think that if you can just identify what the needs are for any brand that you want to work with and say, hey, I'm the guy that can help here. You're making somebody else's job easier, and you're like, that's just the key to everything in life.
Totally. You're the problem solver. You're like, hey, let me take care of that for you, for sure.
Exactly.
And it's like even that coffee shop, right? If you think of like an independent coffee shop, they still are fighting for their place on social or somewhere else, or billboard space or ad space or story space, where they're like, they might not have the budget that Starbucks has, obviously, but maybe they have something, for sure. And then it's like, hey, can you become like, yeah, my mind is already like, all right, guys, if you're listening to this, like, email 10 coffee shops and be ready, or like shoot one, make it awesome, and then email the other 9,
Exactly.
And just like go. And I think too, photographers get nervous. This is something that changed my mentality about corporate work was, I might not be the only guy. They might have 10 of me, doing this thing. And I think we get scared. And part of me, the business side of me is like, I'd like to be all 10 of those, obviously. Yeah. But if they're like, hey, no, we have a team and Dave or Adam is like the East Coast one, or hey, we just need New York stuff, we just need DC stuff. That could be a cool relationship, and like, I think, like, photographers shouldn't be scared of that. Like, trust that it can happen, and then just, still be competitive. Like, try to do the right thing and be the guy and eventually lead that team, maybe,
Yeah, I think that there's just, again, like, I think it all comes back to, we live in an era where there's more demand for visual content than ever before, and it's only going to increase because phones are ubiquitous.
Yeah.
And even beyond that, like, every subway ad is becoming a screen. Everything's becoming a screen, and every screen that goes up is real estate for people like us. And that's really important. And so just, if you can identify, like, look at what's on those screens and being like, can I make that stuff? Who needs that? Who isn't doing that? Who's falling behind? And then being like, hey, I can help you make up the gap here, and I can help you make better social first content. And I like, just trust me to do it, and just start layering from there.
I love that. Yeah. And, maybe when you send that email, try not to be like, hey, you guys suck at this, but just be like, hey, are you guys lacking?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of it like, hey, photographers, we have a knack for being like, I think it was like, how many photographers does it take to screw in a light bulb? And it's like 1, but 99 to tell you they could have done it or how they could have done it. Which is fine. That's really fun. Tell me about some of your other projects that you have going on. So obviously, you have your own Instagram, your own social, your site, everything like that. And it's kind of these traditional corporate relationships for photography. But then, like, you also do Street Dreams magazine, right? Or this, like, kind of fun initiative.
Well, yeah. So Street Dreams is, it's not my project. It's something that I've been involved with since its genesis. And it's like my creative family for sure.
That's awesome.
But I'd recommend you talk to Steve and John Irby, aka Steve Sweatpants. And Eric Veloso and
I'd love to.
Mike
awesome.
C. They are the kind of co-founders. It's kind of based in Vancouver and New York, but also all over. We've been, again, all over the world together, and it's been incredible. And that's a really deep creative community, kind of like agency, and we've done a tremendous amount of work together for them. But I'm more just like, part of the crew and part of the family. And,
okay.
So that I just want to be clear about that. But, my biggest personal kind of leap into the unknown right now is this, editorial website and kind of agency I'm launching.
Yeah.
That's up right now on allships.co. And that's basically, of course, I'm always interested in my own art and photography and travel and that creative lifestyle. But what I love writing. I love talking, I love this kind of thing. I love the exchange of ideas. I love technology. I love longer form conversations. Yeah. And so All Ships is kind of my biggest effort to date in terms of focusing on other artists and trying to amplify their message, and even using my own personal social media to amplify other artists. I think that that's really my goal in all of this. Like, I don't want a platform unless its purpose is to pull other people up and kind of, that expression, all ships rise with the tide, is the genesis of that website. So it's like, we're in this together. It's about collaboration over competition. And it's also about like, hey, let's not let social media own all these conversations around art and how we consume, people's work.
Totally.
I think that they have such a monopoly on our attention that this is kind of my way to push back and be like, no. I'm going to start a platform where I own it completely.
Yeah. And
it's kind of a safe space for artists to talk freely, to talk about the effects of social media on their life, whether, the good and the bad. And to showcase work. And then from my main social accounts where I have much more traction, I can kind of promote those articles and start, directing people towards a new type of experience online. And that's what we're trying to do with All Ships. And then also, leveraging those relationships I build with artists around our conversations on All Ships. And then I've already turned those into gigs for those artists in terms of, okay, now we can build out an agency offering saying like, okay, oh, you need a pixel artist for a project that's coming out. Here's 5 pixel artists I talked to for All Ships, and here's some of their work. And I put all these decks together, and then boom, all of a sudden.
That's super cool. That's awesome, man.
We can do incredibly powerful, like, boutique agency work.
Yeah. And I think, too, a lot of photographers, as we know, it's like, as you grow and say you want to do it as a business, the number one thing I feel like photographers struggle with is the things outside of photography. They're like, hey, I don't know how to get in front of a brand, or I don't know how to create a deck, right? Is that right. required? And, if you get, even if you hear like an RFP, like back in the day, you're like, oh, well, I just send an email with a PDF with a quote or whatever. And like, well, no, like, let's step above the competition or whatever. You can help kind of guide and steward them. And even practically, like, if I was going to make, $100,000 on a corporate gig and be like, oh, Dave's going to help me with my deck and, translating for $10K, sold,
exactly.
like that sounds great. And you'll advocate for them, which I think is cool. And you already are, which is helpful. And then like there's trust from, hey, Dave is going to refer these guys to that particular client. And then they're like, oh yeah, we trust Dave. He was this other person's guy. Great. It's just good all around. Do you think, how challenging do you anticipate it being to fight against the tide, pun intended, with social media and stuff like that, to creating that place? And because social media's goal is for us to stay on, right? Like we talked about the psychology, and they even have psychologists to keep us on. What do you see that being like to get us off of social media and there? Or do you think like,
I don't think it's like the whole like I call it like an anti-algorithm social club. And it's like a little tongue in cheek. Obviously we're not going to win this battle.
Yeah. I love it though. That's awesome.
But the idea isn't to like, we're not going to, destroy social media from the inside out. I obviously rely on social media for my career, and it's not going anywhere. This is just, social media is building kind of like the global brain of humanity, for better or worse.
Yeah. And
it's just a little upsetting to me that like the DNA of that brain building, consciousness building exercise is actually capitalism and like advertising and the attention economy. I think that's really the big risk. Like we kind of made a deal with the devil, and this happened in slow stages, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, I'll sign away my rights for like the ability to post on my friend's wall, like whatever. And then layer after layer after layer, and then it's all of a sudden like there's this walled garden that we all live in, and it's just very like toxic and damaging to our attention spans. But the idea is that like that will always exist in some form, and there'll be new apps, and TikTok was the latest example of an app that just came along and just tore through everyone's society basically. But the point isn't to like David and Goliath this thing. The point is to like create a little space away from that. That's like, if we can take 10 minutes of your time and have you poke through some articles on allships.com, like you're going to walk away from that 10 minutes. It's better spent than scrolling through, mindlessly scrolling through TikTok for an hour.
Yeah.
And so the idea is basically to say that to show that there can be another way of using the internet.
Yeah. And
again, like, I've built up, I think I'm at like 313,000 followers on Instagram now. And it's like, if Instagram shuts down or like they change the algorithm one day, like that, it's like I built a house on land I don't own.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And so like my landlord is Instagram.
Yeah.
And I don't trust my landlord at all. Like I don't think they have my interests in mind at all.
Yeah.
Almost the opposite.
Yeah.
But I think that what I'm trying to do with All Ships is like, I bought the land. Now I'm starting to build my house on it. And like, we're going to build a community for people that is just very like, it's not going to be VC backed. I don't think it's not going to like, I'm hopefully not going to have to run an advertising model. I kind of want it to be like a community supported endeavor and just this little space away and from all that. And the editorial side, I want to kind of just be a layer around, the agency offering, which actually funds the project.
Yeah.
But
Totally
yeah,
just have like
I'm not interested in mimicking what these social media apps have done, because honestly, I think it's unforgivable.
Yeah, the psychologist speaks, right? He knows.
Yeah, it's honestly, I mean, I'm sure you've seen The Social Dilemma.
Yeah. Totally. No, well, I mean, even just in general, like, thinking about all ships and something like that, or any, non-social online communities, which it's hard to think about, right? But it's the idea of, even we talked about imposter syndrome, right? Or even just like you take some scrolls on Instagram and you're like, oh, this is cool. Like, okay, this person made cool work, or this person made cool work. And then other times you scroll through and you're like, oh, I feel like garbage.
Right.
You're like, I am not good enough, or my life's not exciting enough, or whatever. I need to be out there.
Yeah.
But
well, I have a great way to put this.
All right, tell me.
Feel free to borrow this, and I don't think it's necessarily a completely unique idea, but the way I put it is, social media is, you're scrolling through everyone's highlight reel, right?
Yeah, totally.
Literally, they're called highlight reels.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that is, first of all, your brain is not designed to consume 1,000 people's lives in intimate detail.
Yeah, Dunbar's number, right?
Yeah, it's also not designed to only consume positive content, and it's largely skewed towards positive content.
Yeah.
I don't share when I'm feeling depressed. When I feel depressed, I keep to myself,
Yeah.
So like, people see all the highlights and me out shooting and traveling, but like, they don't get any of the pain and struggle and just all the things that come along with that.
Yeah.
Or any of the emotional turmoil that comes from being a freelance artist in any capacity. Also, you're likely consuming those highlight reels when you're in a lower spot, because you're not out doing stuff like that. Right. And so like, it's not only is comparison the thief of joy, but the comparison you're making is when you're in your moments of boredom and loneliness.
Yeah. And vulnerability.
And then you look at everyone else, and it's just the disparity between what you're doing while you're consuming that content and the content that you're watching is so extreme that, of course, it's psychologically damaging. Another thing to think about is that we're actually playing with time itself. So you're consuming 100 highlight reels of everyone living their best life in 10 minutes, but it's like days worth of actual experiences being condensed into these little highlight reels.
Yeah.
So you're thinking, oh my God, they're out there doing so much, and you're not seeing any of the downtime and any of the other things that are necessary to live a healthy life.
Yeah.
And it's a recipe for disaster, honestly.
No, totally. I think that's something I always heard, and this was even pre-social media, but it was, don't judge your behind the scenes by somebody else's highlight reel. And that was kind of the almost exact kind of turn of phrase, because it's like it just looks and feels like something else. And then ironically, like this weekend, just a pure example, like we took the weekend off mentally. We were like, we are hoping for good news. I live in DC, and we voted 98% for Biden. So we were hoping for, I voted that way as well. And I was like hoping for good news, but I was like, all right, let's take a mental break, and like go camping. Right. And we went camping with some good friends, and we were out of it. No social, no nothing. And it felt so good. And like, I was having a highlight. I was having a personal highlight, and I wasn't sharing it. And it was totally fine. And like, I felt great. And I wasn't looking at anybody else's highlights. And I wasn't looking at anybody else's stuff. And
I know where this is going.
Yeah. And it's great. And then I created some images that I'm pumped about, and at least for me, whenever I shoot non-people, I'm not getting paid. I'm like, oh, let me get weird. Let me have some fun.
Yeah.
I texted a landscape friend, and I was like, hey, you should be proud of me. I'm using a tripod and ND filters. Like, who am I? Whereas portrait guys, I never do that. And it's like instantly come back on, and it's like, one, I feel like, oh, I have to share now. I have to do something or whatever. And it's like, no, this took away the joy I just had. This took away like the fun. And so as I'm maturing, I'm trying to find my own boundaries and be like, this is a tool. And when it's time to use that tool, going back to what we started with the camera, like, I'm going to go use this tool, and then I'm not going to, this will not be my mindless option. Like, let's go read, let's go work out. You have big plants, I have big plants. Let's go play with our plants. Let's go study them and make sure they're doing all right. Like, let's read a book, right? Let's go shoot. Because it's like in order for us to be the most fulfilled and make the work we want to make in general, or go back to having fun with the camera, like you gotta be in charge of your mental capacity. And I think like something like All Ships too, like you're not gonna have that that dread looking at it. You're gonna be like, oh, this is so cool, hopefully, and that's a new way of thinking about it. And so I all that to circle back, I love the All Ships idea. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, and it's about really being, again, I think it's the duty of an artist to kind of be the bridge between the people that taught you and the people learning from you.
Yeah.
And that's also like kind of in the DNA of All Ships is like, I'm an open book.
Yeah.
Like people DM me, I try to get back to everybody and I'm like, okay, here's what I think, here's what I want to do. Like I started my iPhone account, Secret Street, to prove to people that you can get started with what you're texting me on right now.
Yeah, totally.
I'm like, just go start. Like, I love that body of work I've built. And I'm like, I'm just as proud of that as I am of my other account.
Yeah.
Where I have much more attraction. But the idea is like, I want to show that anyone can do this. Really, anyone can do this. It's just, you need to really love it and be dedicated to it. And you got to find your own path. Cause like, you can listen to my path and like, I just need to say like that the path that I took is closed forever. Like it has to do with what technology was available at the time.
Yeah.
What opportunities were available at the time, what ideas were available at the time. And the world has moved on. And now there's new paths that, people will easily surpass me in a much shorter amount of time. Like, people on TikTok and doing all these other things. And like, that's great. I encourage it.
Yeah.
But the path to success now looks very different from the path that I took or the path that anybody took.
Yeah.
In 10 years ago or 6 years ago.
Totally. I love that. Well, dude, what else do you have going on other than All Ships this year? Anything fun coming up? I know COVID's like just...
Yeah, I mean, I lost most of my work this year because I'm a big travel guy. Travel's off the table a little bit, although I do have some potential Mexico City gigs that I'm trying to see if I can work out. Yeah. As long as I can do the right protocol and be safe about it and,
totally.
Test just the testing. And we're trying to work it out with some brands. So maybe some of the winter in Mexico, but maybe not. I've used this as an opportunity to really like get All Ships up and running. And like, I would really, the conversations that we've had unfold on that site are actually really, really deep and compelling to me. And I would encourage anybody to just go check it, see what, there's amazing artists up there. If you're an artist out there and you want to write something or you want to, you like pitch an idea for the site, let's talk, email me. It's just, I want it to be a platform for the people and like run by people. And let's go. Like it can be anything we want it to be. And like, let's let it evolve. And the point is that we own it, it's not, there's no, we're not subjected to terms of service or, you can post anything we want up there. So I just really would encourage people to check it out. And the artists that we've had so far have been really open books and super intimate with the way they're talking about their creative process and their mental health and everything really. And so it's just a real deep dive, breath of fresh air, refreshing kind of space. So definitely check that out.
I love that. Where can people go to find out more about All Ships? And then where can people go to DM you, learn from you, follow you?
So the best way to get a hold of me is probably just DM me on my personal Instagram account, which is dave.krugman.
Awesome. Very cool.
I think, is that how you reached me?
Yeah. That's how I got it.
So it works, folks. So that's a good place to start. But, davekrugman.com has all information about me and my press and tons of conversations like this. For All Ships, it's just allships.co.
I love that.
And it's a really beautiful website. My designers killed it. I'm really proud of them. That's that. There's an Instagram account for All Ships, which is the same as the website, allships.co. My iPhone work is Secret Street on Instagram. And I just launched a new Instagram account for my film scans.
Oh, yeah.
Which is called Atoms of Eve.
That's awesome.
And that's gonna be a very active account because I've scanned hundreds of medium format rolls lately, and I'm just kind of one a day or two a day. I'm just gonna start leaking them out, and it's work that I haven't shared before. So if you're excited about film, that's gonna turn into like my whole film hub, and I'll talk about scanning and my process. And right now I'm just kind of building it out visually. So.
That's cool. That's awesome. I've never shot a frame of film, so I have no idea about any of that process. So that's super. I'm definitely going to follow that. Awesome, man. Well, hey, great to have you on. Incredible. Yeah, I'm definitely encouraged by this already. Like, this was like an actual fun conversation in general.
Yeah, this is great, man.
Which is cool. And so hopefully when the world doesn't end, I look forward to, going on Insta Meets and having more photographers hang out. And if you're ever in DC, hit me up, man. It's great to have you on, Dave.
Hey, man, it was an honor. It was such a good conversation, and I appreciate it so much. And again, I'm an open book. Anyone listening, you have questions, hit me up. Let's talk. If you want some guidance for your own path, I'll do everything I can to help. So thanks again, and looking forward to watching this back.
Oh man, guys, I hope you loved that episode. Dave is absolutely a baller. He's super fun, super gentle, super kind. I love that. Like, he is, I consider one of my heroes, like a big dog in the photography space. And he's so gentle and approachable. And I think that is like, that's one of the things I love about social media, is that it makes our people we love, our heroes, a little bit more approachable. And if they're chill, then you could be chill. And then you talk, and then you're having fun. And like, then Dave ends up on your podcast, and that's where we're at. So guys, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, subscribe in your podcast player. I would tell you again, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, to The Bearded Hog. That would mean a lot. Also, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already. It really, really helps the show. I had no idea, actually, when we started that it helps so much, but it really helps, and other guests look at it as a measure of whether they want to come on the show or not. So it really, really helps. It's also free to do, so please do that. And if you're a photographer and still listening to this, I host business-based workshops every month in our Facebook group for free, all about different parts of running a photography business that I think would really encourage you if you're still starting out. Maybe you're struggling with where you're at with the pandemic, all that kind of stuff. We covered it all, from SEO to sales to marketing to leads to standing out in a crowded market. I would love for you to come join. It's free. TOGFB.com if you want a quick link to that. It's just on Facebook, called Fulfilled Photographers. Would love to have you there. And lastly, if you're an Instagram fan, come follow me on Instagram at Mason Photography. I post silly photos of myself, also some of my wedding work, and it's really the best place to get a hold of me. I love you guys. Have a wonderful day. Keep being awesome.